Good morning, and welcome to the first in a series of podcasts designed to help provide additional listening and note-taking practice for our second language learners here at Western Kentucky University. The topic for this inaugural podcast is going to be English as a global language, and more specifically, whether English will one day replace other world languages. By the end of this podcast, listeners will be able to compare and contrast 2 points of view on this topic, and will be able to assess the validity of each of those arguments. Now, this topic of English as a global language is one that affects all of you who are listening, and the key question that linguists are trying to decide is, given the unprecedented use of English worldwide, will English actually replace other world languages? Well, what do you think? What's your gut feeling on this? Is it really possible that English could replace other world languages? Now, there are 2 contrasting points of view on the topic. The first view states that not only will English replace other languages, but that it's already happening. Can you think of examples from your own lives as students? I mean, you guys use English every day, don't you? You use English at school, when you're shopping, when you're at the grocery store, when you're at the bank. Think about the movies that you watch, the television shows, the music you listen to. How about the internet? Right? Now, those who support this first point of view also like to point out that English has become the dominant language of business, science, and international travel. They point out that when you go to airports, hotels, international conferences, English is the lingua franca, right? The common language that is used for communication in many of those settings. They point out that the European Union uses English for both their written and verbal communication. Business schools in Europe teach classes in English, even in France. A country that tried very hard to keep English out of their schools has now started using English in their classrooms. Proponents of this position also point out that 75 countries in the world list English as their official language, and that more than 1 billion people speak English as a second or even as a third language. So it's clear that millions throughout the world do rely on English in both their professional and their personal life. But does that really mean that English will actually replace other world languages? Well, many people don't think so. They agree that it is true that more than 1 billion people do speak English as a second or third language. However, they are very quick to note that that is not their primary language. Right? They use English for work or for school, but they actually speak their native languages at home. Even here in the United States, many people who use English in specific school or job situations actually speak their primary languages at home. Also, while it is true that 75 countries in the world do list English as their official language, that does not mean that every person in that country actually speaks English. Take India as a prime example. India has both English and Hindi as their official languages, but less than half of the population knows any English in the country. So just because a country lists English as an official language does not mean that it is actually used very often. Those who oppose the idea that English will one day replace other world languages have argued that as English becomes more invasive, cultures will actually try even harder to protect their own languages and cultures. Now, for me, I tend to support this second argument, that English will not actually replace other languages. We have seen other global languages in the past that have risen and fallen, and it's just the natural way of things. But what do you think? Right, you've heard both arguments, English will or will not replace other languages, so what is your opinion? Will English lose its status as a global language one day, and if so, which language do you think would actually replace it? Chinese? Arabic? Think about it.